Welcome to Flexing the Future, the Entras podcast on the energy transition and flexibility. By us, Frank Allaerts,
Jens Batens,
and Jeroen van Vrachem. In this podcast, we'll discuss the impact of the energy transition on the flexibility of the industry in Belgium and in Europe.
Not among ourselves, of course. Alternatively, we'll ask true experts in the field to share their knowledge, insights and vision with you.
Welcome Bart, welcome to Flexing the Future. It's the Entras podcast about energy transition and the role of flexibility in this process. So today we have Bart Wouters from Prayon in our studio. Welcome Bart.
Thanks Jeroen for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here today and talk about this really interesting subject. So
excellent.
Let's go for it.
It's a broad topic and maybe before we start analyzing together, maybe a quick question. Your personal view on the state of affairs, where are we? Is the energy transition for industry on its way, or just your first gut feeling?
My personal feel is actually that we are really taking off. It's the beginning of a real journey. If you would look back 2 years ago, most of companies were wondering how they would attack this kind of transition. Today, most of us are able to speak about the roadmap and how they are building their future. So for me, it's actually the beginning of a long journey.
Yeah, and it was also a big shock 2-3 years ago with the energy crisis. Maybe it shook up things also.
Well, it's accelerating things, that's for sure, because as you know, European level, they change even targets based to this. But most of the companies like Prayon as well, energy and energy efficiency is something which is quite common to us. We are an industry which is relying on energy availability. So over the years, we have been developing roadmaps and plans to become efficient in energy consumption. So this, for me, is actually an extension. It's accelerating things where we need to look at, but it's really an extension.
Okay, so maybe on your role and on Prayon. So you are currently the COO at Prayon. So can you maybe briefly explain what your main activities are and your main focus?
Yeah. So Prayon, we are a Belgian company, but with a global footprint. So we are actually serving global customers. We are active in the phosphate industry. So when the mission we have with our company is actually with our chemistry, we are a chemical company, this I didn't say, with our chemistry really enriching the everyday life of people. So in this respect, if you would take basically any product from a shelf or whatever, you would potentially find some products of us. So baking sector is a sector which is quite common to us. If you would go to precision agriculture, there actually we have some fertilizers which actually reduce water consumption. And even today in energy transition, we do play a role because many of the battery systems which are being put in place are based on
lithium phosphate.
Lithium phosphate, yeah.
Yes.
And we have, as a phosphate producing company, this is part of our industry.
Okay.
So Prayon, and this I didn't tell, we are actually, as I said, a Belgian player, two production sites in Belgium, but one in France as well, one in the US and one in Switzerland. So really with the global
Okay,
footprint.
well, interesting. Maybe later on we have to talk a little bit about the US because also interesting things in the energy transition are happening there. We know, we worked also on this together, we know that you have plans to make your industrial process more sustainable. Mm-hmm. And of course, industry is carbon intensive. So the process of becoming carbon neutral in the end, it's a big change. It's a big challenge for the industry. How did you approach that?
Yeah, and then you need to go back a bit to the fundamentals of our company. In the 50s, actually, we developed already quite a project where the way you produce phosphoric acid is really in a way that we try to do it in a CO2 as neutral way as possible. So if you compare it with what's typically being done in other parts of the world, then you would see that the core of our processes are already quite CO2 effective.
Because your basic feedstock is
not
necessarily...
about feedstock, it's about the process that we have put in place.
Uh-huh.
And we will come to this afterwards because this is key of the transition, what we will be doing as well. Okay. So it's really about the fundamentals of how we actually do. We have what we call a wet process. And this is actually a chemical attack of the phosphate rock, while the other process would be a thermal process where you would actually heat up in an electrical furnace with a lot of char. So you create a lot of CO2.
So very energy intensive on top of the char to have the reduction process ongoing.
Indeed.
Okay.
And that's actually the core. related to this, actually, as I said, lots of energy efficiency projects what we have been doing. So from mindset point of view, if you want to attack such a project like energy transition, you know that this is the kind of mindset, what you need.
And the DNA somehow is there in this long quest for energy efficiency.
Yeah,
of
indeed,
course.
that's part of our DNA. And then, of course, we started to assemble and to define what are the real drivers today why we want to do this energy transition.
Mm-hmm.
And we contacted you, Entras, as well.
Yes.
To make sure that we took the roadmap in the right way. And the first thing, actually, what we did is defining those drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Prayon is a company which is owned by, two long-term shareholders. They have a long-term view on the company, and for us, this is important because one of our values is we aim far.
Yes.
So if you develop a roadmap and you have a long visibility, this helps, of course, to translate and even to accommodate huge investment projects if required.
Yeah, because if we are talking about energy transition, the plans you're making, you're not talking about the next 5 years.
No, we're talking until 2050.
Exactly.
Clearly,
yes.
in 2 stages, but we're talking about 2050.
Yes.
And so what we did actually in the energy transition, we really cut it in two. The reason why we cut it in two, because one of the drivers, of course, is you want to somehow reply to the European change on energy transition, where also the milestones have been cut in two to some extent, with some deliverables towards
the Fit for
2030.
55 targets and the ETS reforms and all of that. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you fix somehow your ambition level with respect to this. But in addition to this, we also have been looking to what our customers want. And we are in a B2B market. Mm-hmm. So serving quite some big industrial players as well.
Yes.
Some food companies as well. And they clearly have taken the mindset of this energy transition. So we saw already several years before that actually our customers were also asking, what's Prayon doing on energy transition? How are we going to mitigate for CO2? And at the end, of course, the last thing what we did, and that was really one of the first drivers what we had is, yes, but we want to sustain on the long run.
Yes.
So projects, what we need to do, how can we make sure that those projects actually, let's say, are cost competitive and we are able to maintain a certain cost base on the long run.
Okay, but driven by the fact that your customers have certain requirements because they also are in the same living in the same reality, it can actually not only be a burden, it can also then maybe open opportunities.
It's clearly opening opportunities because actually it's opening opportunities to the extent for the moment being customers do not want to pay more. That's clear.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's creating mindset.
Yeah.
And this mindset is basically what you need not only to tell the external story, but also to tell the internal story.
Okay.
Because people basically only see cost appear. And people are not working necessarily on the long run. People are looking what the today activities will be.
Yeah. Okay. And brings me maybe to a second aspect, because you were talking about mindset. Actually, it's the mindset of several stakeholders. And as if I hear you, then you say, well, if you want to succeed, we have to have all the stakeholders on board. And so you touched upon, I would say, the first stakeholders. Maybe we can dive a little bit into that, which is the people working at Prayon, I guess. They have to do it.
They have to do it, and they need to be not only that they do the practical thing, they also need to be convinced that at the long run this will contribute to the company. And so what we actually did in this perspective is from a really early stage, we mapped first, let's say, the consumptions and the demand and whatever, the profiles.
Have the data.
Yes. That's why we are engineers.
Yes. Yeah, but it is important. Yeah.
It's a fundamental thing. Yeah. So we mapped the data. And afterwards, rather than coming with solutions ourselves, from a very early stage, we did it on a workshop basis.
Yes.
Where we were actually probing, I would say the full organization, at least the people which have a bit of which are energy savvy, which are process savvy. So they could bring their ideas. And in our particular case, it was really interesting because we were initially with a strong fixed mind on a certain big investment.
Yes.
At the end, we changed our mind, not on the investment itself, but where we needed to do it.
Yes.
And that was actually one of the workshops which helped us to create this platform where people actually contribute to the roadmap.
Yeah, and then the good ideas
bubble
come
up
to the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I can add to that because I'm asking the question, but I was of course deeply involved. It was a very interesting journey. One basic topic is people are, I would say, energy savvy, process savvy, but not necessarily always informed because you have a lot of information on what is coming. So I think one of the good things was to do also some kind of, I would not say trainings, but I would say exchange on the broader picture. So not only talking about the cost of gas, but maybe looking at what is happening in the world, what are the challenges. I had the feeling in the workshops that this opened, I would say, the mindset of the people a lot.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. And you have seen it afterwards as well. We have used actually this kind of knowledge also to start communicating. You've been present in quite some offsites where people which were really interested in this energy transition, were educated to some extent on what's the profile of Prayon, what kind of technologies are available, why do you choose certain technologies, and why, for the moment being, these technologies are not the best ones for Prayon. So there was really an educational part, even before we came to the practical solutions, what we wanted to put in place.
Yes, to achieve this carbon neutrality on the long term. Very interesting. I think it's a good lesson maybe for also other people maybe listening to this discussion. Let's try to find the ideas from below, while of course having a good fact base, that we know what is reasonable, what is feasible, what are stories, and what is the reality that
and then once you have the technologies available, what we didn't discuss, because from Prayon side we asked competitiveness.
Yes.
And then, of course, experts like you come in, because when the mindset of people is created, you also need to make sure that you focus it to the right technologies and the ones which are potentially benefiting the company.
Yes.
And that what was also very nice, and that the models or the way we approached it is actually very high level in the beginning, but allowing to crystallize, to come to very concrete solutions at the end. And people at that point start understanding why, not only why, but the need of certain projects, what you put in place.
Yes, from all the options, at some point you have to nail it down also, and then it becomes specific for your company, Prayon, which is a phosphate chemistry, which is different from petrochemistry, from a DNA. So you have to narrow it down, but at least the decisions are then, I would say, with the whole company are behind the decisions that are taken in the process.
Yeah, and the strange thing is, when we started the project, we didn't fix a target. We set an ambition level. We somehow aiming at what European level, but we didn't fix a target. At the end of the workshop, everybody was feeling confident to fix a target.
Yes.
So we were able to say, Prayon, by 2030, for this and this, we are going to reduce with 45% our CO2 emissions.
Yeah, so it's a bit reversing the narrative from we are subject to what comes to us. No, we are taking our destiny in our own hands, and we can make something out of it. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, very interesting, and I think an aspect which is often underestimated or not enough attention to is the fact that the people need to do it.
It's not only they need to do it; they need to be convinced. But because at the end, all companies will, by some means, need to make this energy transition.
Yes.
Why? And there's also this battle for talent. So why people want to work for certain companies? Because they are convinced you're on the right way.
Well,
this helps.
Absolutely, it's something I can testify from Entras. Actually, it's difficult to find people, but actually we don't have that much trouble if we have an open position. We're a small company. Typically, you have a lot of people, and the reason behind this is what we are doing. It's the purpose of this whole transition. It has to be done. We have another, let's say, 20, 30 years. It has to happen now. Huh?
Yeah, and you can look at it from the negative way. You can say it has to be done, or you can look for opportunities.
Yes.
In our particular case, and when we are now detailing out the roadmap, the first step of the projects, what we are going to do, are even financially contributing to the company. So it's even actually projects which are positive and have a financial return. So it's not just energy transition, it's contributing to the business. Okay. It's of course not the full scope, because at the end the transition will cost money.
The last steps
but
will become difficult.
The first big chunk we are going to do is adding value to the company.
Yes. And maybe we discussed the importance of, I would say, the internal stakeholders, the employees and the people working at Prayon, but of course other stakeholders. Immediately now you're talking about profitability of investment. How did you get your, I would say, financiers, your shareholders, your banks on board of this story? Because it is a capex intensive game to play.
It's a capex-intensive game to play. There are many answers to that question. What we first secured, and also there you need to tell the story, is at board level.
Yes.
And people have in mind that energy transition would cost something like 200 euros per ton of CO2 or something like that.
Yeah, while I would say the ETS price of CO2 would be roughly 80 or a bit
yeah.
lower now.
So everybody says
yeah.
if you want to abate a ton of CO2, it's about 200 euros. Okay.
So
it's cost intensive.
It's too
you multiply by the tonnage you have, and you know what the extra cost you have on
millions and billions.
Millions and billions.
Yes.
In our case, quite some millions.
Yes.
But of course, if you start to prepare for this kind of explanation, a very nice thing what we developed is, depending on the technologies, and you helped us quite well, Jeroen, on this one. Depending on the technologies, how much CO2 do we abate at a certain cost, and then you really can see that you can abate below cost of CO2. But this story you need to tell also to the board,
yes,
also to the financiers,
yes,
because they see that there is an intermediate way if you do it properly.
Yeah.
So financing from this perspective, and although it will be cost-intensive project, is partly related to, can you create a sustainable business? Other thing what's happening in our case is that more and more we are not a stock-listed company, but we are significant. We have more than 1 billion turnover. We are a company which banks look at actively, and also to our sustainability goals. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you work on energy transition helps in your financing rate.
Will you go very public then with your plans?
No. For the moment, no. Yeah. Because we are basically, our ownership is the Walloon government partly, so we are not a publicly owned company. Okay. What we will be doing is looking for subventions and subsidies, and then it comes to the tricky point, of course, in Europe compared to the American situation. Yes. For the moment being, for the kind of projects we have in mind, the amount of, let's say, subvention, the amount of subsidies you can get is likely not so high.
Yes. Meaning a few percent of what it would cost.
Yeah. Everybody is speaking that these innovation funds which are available for the energy transition might be interesting. Yes. But you need to look. It's about new and novel technologies.
Yes.
So what we are doing for the first part is not about new technologies.
Yes.
In some cases for us it's important. But it's not at the TRL level 2, 3, 5 or something.
Technology readiness has to be.
It's really mature technologies what we are going to put in place.
Otherwise, you can't run a chemical business based on experiments.
And it has also been a clear choice. When we made the roadmap, I didn't say, but to hit our 2030 targets, we decided to take technologies which have a certain level of maturity.
Yes.
So the subvention part is different from the US situation. There, the mechanisms to get financing for these kinds of projects is much more straightforward than in Belgium. And so this will be a big challenge. And I think, in general, if Europe wants to support its industry, they really need to think how they can also, in this type of conversion where you do not speak about breakthrough technologies, how they can help actually industry because there will be a lot of investment what needs to be done.
Yeah, and there are, of course, a lot of technologies now which are, I would say, on the brink of breakthrough. You've got, of course, energy storage and so on, but there is also like carbon capture, which is today not mature enough. However, in the horizon where we are looking at, let's say 10, 15 years, maybe in 5 years, at some point we will reach the technology maturity, that it becomes investable for an industry like you. So are you then anticipating that technology readiness, or how you look at that?
In this particular case, carbon capture is clearly on our roadmap.
Yes.
Not to the extent, let's say we are a small emitter with respect to the part we can capture.
Yeah.
We are actually, and there I need to rephrase a bit what I said earlier, we are in a subvented project from the Walloon part, but it's really only to put in a pilot. It's really the small investment which is at this moment.
It's like a proof of concept.
It's like a proof of concept.
Okay.
And the way we look at it, we are confident by the time that we need that technology, that for what we need to do, actually, it will be available, it will be commercialized. So at that point, it's not novel. It will not be the technology where you get the breakthrough innovation.
Yeah. So in a roadmap or in a plan on the longer term, you can now develop just the study work. I would say gain experience in technology in case the maturity, then the technology readiness is high enough, by the time you really have to take the next step in reduction, that then it becomes hopefully profitable or at least feasible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in our particular case, and for the moment, the first part of our energy transition, and you know as well, we're aiming at, let's say, basically steam production and one of the CO2 emissions we have from a raw material.
Yes.
In the later phase, and there potentially we can go to the new technologies. We also have in the process what we have really a lot of consumption of gas to make one or several types of products what we really have. And it's not to supply heat, but really in the chemical reaction what we need to do.
Yeah.
There we need to develop technology. And in this particular case, we have started the full development projects internally, and there, of course, having state intervention or subsidies is something what actually is looked at.
Okay, so then really technology, process-specific technology. Prayon is then at some point becoming, I would say, a developer of technology for your niche in then, I would say, of activities.
And it comes to our roots because, as I said, a big part of what we do is not only selling chemical products, we also sell technology worldwide. Yes. The way you produce phosphoric acid is one of the key roots today is actually Prayon technology. So what we will develop... Worldwide, yeah.
Okay, impressive. Belgian company, well done.
Yeah. Not always known, but we actually have a technology which is used, and as I explained, really energy efficient. Not only energy efficient, but it's a sidestep. In this kind of process, you also make some co-products. Yes. And the way we have developed the project or the process, actually these products can be valorized as well. So it's really a sustainable way of producing phosphoric acid. But actually, what's the importance for us? The technologies what we develop now today, which help our next phase in energy transition. We have an affiliate, we have a company which is actually servicing the market.
Okay.
And so in this respect also will help to do the transition on let's say on our industry scale, on how you can look at energy and energy performance and energy transition.
But if I hear all this, actually, it's to reductionists to look at energy transition as a task of the energy manager of the company, because it touches upon, I would say, the core business model at some point of Prayon.
If you say this is beyond the task of an energy
it's more
manager,
than only that.
Because I understood it's the task. It's clearly not only the task of the energy transition manager.
Yes.
In our case, it's the way we do business. It's about some extent defensive, making sure that you do the energy transition.
Yes.
The way we attack it, it's also creating opportunities. We will be investing, or we are studying, I need to say it in this way, to invest in a new sulfuric acid plant.
Yes. which
for us, of course, is a raw material what we use. Yes. It has a huge source of energy.
So the raw material is a sulfur, which is, I would say, you can mine it if you would like, or it's a byproduct from another process.
Worldwide, there's an abundance available
of sulfur.
Of sulfur.
Yeah. So that, and then you process to
and actually, it's a source. It's a source of energy, and it's a source. It's a source of a chemical, which is sulfuric acid. What we need for our production of phosphoric acid.
Well, this is typically something every business, I guess, some easier than others, have their specific advantage in the race. I would say in your case, you work with sulfur, which is like a fuel also. You can burn it. It's exothermal. It provides the heat, while at the same time, it doesn't emit CO2. And at the same time, it is a base chemical for the rest of your process.
Yeah.
So and that is our cornerstone then of what the plan is.
It's part of the cornerstones, and it requires specific knowledge as well. Not everybody.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's still a corrosive product, so there's quite some knowledge what we have.
Yes.
And so there, actually, we want to benefit from internal experience, and this will be part of our roadmap as well.
Very interesting. Sometimes people say to us, energy is very complicated. But the good thing, especially for chemical industry, but a lot of industry actually, they do complex things. Sometimes more complex than energy. And I think in your case, if somebody can master a chemical process, with a bit of explanation, they have all the tools to also master energy.
Yeah, and an element was really important for us in this case that except from the rock, because we do not own the phosphate rock, but for the rest, we have a fully integrated value chain. We grow from, let's say, the production of base acid, which is attacking the rock and making sure that the first phosphoric acid, up to the end product. And in this way, you can master energy flows, you can master side flows. So you actually create a value chain along these factories, what we have. And this is one of the reasons, actually, why we are really sustaining our activities in Europe, because we have this value-adding way of looking at the phosphate industry.
Very interesting. And actually, we touched now on a lot of feedstock, chemical components. We didn't talk a lot about electricity yet. And actually, it's not Entras is not electricity transition services. It is energy transition services, and in its own right, because it's not only electricity. However, a big part to decarbonize industry will come from renewable energy, and that's what I sometimes say. It's one of the miracles. Look, not everybody's aware, but one of the miracles that happened over the last decade, which we need to make it happen, is the fact that renewables have become very cost competitive. But of course, on the other hand, they have their issues. They're not baseload, while a factory is typically a continuous baseload asset. How do you look at what do you believe is the role of electricity also for a company like Prayon, and how do you see that in the face of the renewable transitions?
Yeah. So just to explain first, we built our roadmap on scope 1 emissions. So really the emissions from actually the gas basically.
Yeah, scope 1 is the part emissions that comes out of the chimney, out of the tailpipe. That is your scope 1. Your scope 2 emissions would be then the emissions that come from the electricity or the energy you buy on the market, which would be electricity. Or even produce. So electricity typically is a scope 2 emission, and then scope 3 is all the rest. So your focus is scope 1, because if every company does this scope 1, in the end, everything is solved, of course. Yes.
So from this perspective, let's say electricity is for us somehow a source.
Yes.
Which of course helps us to decarbonize. And the way we look today, you touched the type of industry we are. We have quite some, let's say, continuous processes.
Yes.
So key for us is to have a stable production. We have some room for variation, but on the long run, once a process is running, you need to make sure that you have. So if you look to, in particular, electricity, if it comes to steam, of course, this can help us, because there in theory you can easily make steam boilers, and you can buffer steam or whatever you want, but you can make sure that the process is running in a smooth way.
Yes.
If you would talk about, let's say, flexibility.
Yes,
because that's another way of where you can look at electricity. It's not that we are not in a position to do nothing, but the level of, let's say, flexibility we can introduce is we cannot switch on and off our processes.
Yes.
So the way we are looking to these renewable energy sources is that we need a constant flow.
Yes.
And if we need to buffer that constant flow, because in theory you can also buffer, then it would probably be buffering heat. Yes, rather than buffering other things.
So I would say the buffering the electricity part would be part of other players in the market. However, there are price signals. When there is abundance of electricity, typically prices go down. Value of flexibility increases because the network has to be stabilized. So I guess there is also opportunity in that.
There is opportunity, but then it would be more in our case to either the parts where we have, based on the sulfuric acid plants, production of electricity ourselves, so you can tune between steam production and electricity production.
So you arbitrage more between the different markets. Yes.
The other part where we can benefit, and this is really not looked at for the moment being, some processes are partly semi-continuous processes.
Yes.
There you can decide at what moment of your cycle you potentially put in production or you wouldn't put in production. But this is really at the early stage.
Because the whole, especially in the big chemical, I would say, like in the port of Antwerp, where everything is connected, it's maybe difficult, but you master more your own scope, and you have probably a bit more opportunity then, or?
I'm not sure. We are not in typically these industry parks, so we cannot benefit from the leveling capacity which is over there.
Yeah, it's a knife that cuts both ways, of course. Yes.
So where our sites are located, actually, it's quite in a distant area. So the site needs to be in some sort of autonomous mode of operation.
Yes.
And the flexibility what you can put in place is basically related to the way you can handle variations in your order book. Because if you have a full continuous process, it's about can we slow down or ramp up certain capacities. That's the basic flexibility what we can put in place.
Okay.
But it's of course a value driver. And years ago we were actually in a real volume-minded mind state.
Yes.
State of mind. Value comes also from how do you master not only the volumes, but how you do master the margins. So there is a bit of a shift also where we look at what's actually bringing value, and in this respect, translating it to the way we can operate the plants. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it will bring, it's, I would say, the old world where we had a base load, stable price, energy source. I'm afraid it's a bit gone and it will become different. But it's not something that introduces a lot of risks to you if you manage it, or how do you look at it?
But it's part of the business case in my mind.
Yes.
So we have on our roadmap, we have clearly electrification for steam part.
Yes.
You can do it in a way that you either look to a big boiler and make sure that you have a continuous load and potentially or sometimes too high in consumption compared to what you need. Or you can look at projects where you potentially even store heat.
Yes.
And play on that variation as well.
Yeah.
When we will developing roadmaps and business plans, we will clearly look at what the business case is behind. So there is a business case?
Yeah.
And that's part of the answers, why we are convinced that you can have a transition which is remaining competitive if we have a business case where buffering some sort of energy will help to play on variation and pricing. Of course, we will look at it.
Yes. And if it turns out that heat storage is a, I would say, better battery than a chemical electricity-driven battery, why not? Then you have a business case.
Why not? Why not? And the funny part of that story is that due to kind of developments what we have been doing, we have actually Access developed together with another company material which is able to store heat as well.
Okay,
so
we close the loop.
We might potentially close the loop. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that actually besides a lot of challenges, there are a lot of opportunities. Maybe one element, if we started, you could summarize it by saying, of course, we all have to be a bit more agile. We cannot be baseload. We need flexibility. We have to be able to react to things. I guess we have to automate that, because that cannot be decisions once a week in the board. It has to be something minute by minute almost in the end. Mm-hmm. You need a lot of data for that. So how do you look at that? How do you look at the data today? Are you already advanced, or is it something you have to start building up? Or
in our industry, by nature, actually, we have quite some data available from processes. Yes. So the internal data, they are available. What do we do with those data? Today, we have actually technologies implemented, analytical tools, which allow us to do big data analysis and build models.
Okay.
The models which we typically build for the moment being are heavily relating to the way we actually operate our installations from process point of view.
Yes.
The opportunity I still see further is actually the way we operate them from energy point of view.
Yes, that's not only that. Actually, it's the same principle, just broaden again the view from the process to the whole energy and process, and then
and actually we were. And I'm thinking already 2014, 2015, we did a big project, and there we linked energy data with process data. But at the end, it was deciding on what kind of feedstock would require a certain energy, let's say steam demand, and this kind of thing was really local. I think the future for us will be to actually agglomerate these data and make sure that we can operate in a more efficient way, several plants which have similar profiles and so on and so forth. But we are focusing today not on this kind of integration. We're focusing today on making sure that this kind of data technology is available for all our sites.
Okay. I hear, beside a lot of challenges, I do hear some optimism because there are a lot of opportunities. Actually, it's also personally, I think, intellectually interesting moment to be active in energy today and industry because a lot of things are changing. However, coming back to the initial opening question. How do you see the future of industry in Europe then? Because it's not maybe for everybody. I think for Prayon there are a lot of opportunities, but maybe it's not the case for everybody.
I'm an optimistic guy. So as you said, energy transition is, especially for engineers, but it's a bit of a challenge, but it's also fun. How do I look at the European industry? The positive thing is that European actors have not only accepted, but they are also really acting to do this energy transition. Of course, it's costing money.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows that, and I spoke about the 200 euros to abate some CO2.
Yes.
There is a part of energy transition which will come with cost.
Yes.
Prayon is in a company, we are energy demanding, but not so energy intensive as certain other companies in the industry. And so from European point of view, I really think that governments need to make sure that there is a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
The really intensive companies will be in a big cost
more
burden,
difficult position.
more difficult position.
Mm-hmm.
So Europe needs to secure a level playing field, and level playing field is, for me, it's on access to funding,
yes,
a subvention or whatever, because the scheme is not the same in the US, but
yes,
it's also with respect to permitting.
Okay.
And for the moment being, what we see is that basically the permitting issues are even more
pressing today.
More pressing than actually the financing issues.
And then I would add one more, which is grids. We need grid capacity. I think it's important. Yeah.
I didn't speak about that. But if Europe doesn't foresee the infrastructure,
yes,
then it will be a very difficult story. Yeah. The lucky thing, I think, in Belgium, at least the mindset is created.
Yes,
we can speak a bit about speed. But
yes,
the mindset is created. So for Belgium, I'm less concerned.
mm-hmm.
We also have factories in other parts of the world.
Yes.
And there the speed and the mindset is not so far
not yet there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in Belgium, on the electricity or the grid side, there is a new mindset. But if we talked about the future of industry in Europe, but if you zoom into Belgium, how are we doing in Belgium or parts of Belgium doing then? Or is it, I would say, the general European trend, or is something that differentiates Belgium?
What I see is that Belgium is actually mindset-wise more advanced on certain other regions.
Okay.
You know a bit where we have our plants. I've less vision on certain area, and let's say it in France, on what their transition will be than I have in Belgium.
Okay.
So that's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I compare to the US, where we also have a plant, and that's broadening the scope, then you know that we are really fighting in Europe against an industry in the US where the rules are not the same.
The rules are the same, yeah. So we have to be prepared also then on the governance, I would say, the political level to back the European industry.
Exactly.
Okay. Maybe to round up, because I hear a lot of interesting elements. Would you have any advice for other companies, your peers or other companies, typically industrial companies, that are maybe still a bit stuck or still a bit hesitating and they are not yet started but want to start this process of an industrial plan to have a carbon neutral future? Do you have any advice for those companies? What are the key elements they should look at?
Yeah, from my perspective, first take it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Because although it is a burden, it's still there can be opportunities in.
Yes.
And second thing is make sure that you have all your stakeholders on board, because they will probably bring more interesting ideas and more interesting topics on table where you even didn't think about
from the outset.
From the outside.
Yeah.
And the third one is, and that's the reason why we are collaborating, Jeroen, make sure that you have a good expert network around you, because they can bring value as well.
Excellent. Well, I think that is a good message. I'm looking forward to the next years of working together. In the process, we have to learn while doing also a lot, because there is some uncharted territory. It's not the path is not always crystal clear and it moves a lot, but I'm looking forward to it.
We as well. And yesterday I made a comment to our colleagues. I'm even convinced that there will be more energy transitions, because we're really looking at a window from, let's say, until 2050. So it's not just one project what you put in place. It's a continuous process what you need to put in place. So,
excellent. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Let's get to work. Thanks for your time.
With pleasure, Jeroen. Thank you.